Hello, everybody, and welcome into the latest edition of the OKPreps Kickoff Show. I'm your host, Michael Knight, the director of OKPreps.com, and it is week 6. We are officially at the halfway point of the 2019 regular season, and you can go to OKPreps.com right now because we've started to drop all of our mid-season reports from 6A1 all the way down to Class A. Who are the teams to beat? Who's been a surprise team? What have been the top storylines? Who have been the best players? You can check that out right now on OKPreps.com. But it is week 6, and we got another great slate of games for you, especially in Class 4A. And we're going to dive into all of that here momentarily. But week 5 certainly was crazy, and it has set the stage for a lot of must-win situations in week number 6. But as we do each and every single week, we want to remind you to subscribe if you haven't done so already to the OKPreps YouTube channel. All you have to do is go to youtube.com/OKPreps and hit subscribe. It costs you nothing. I know if you hear the word subscribe, you immediately think you want my credit card number. Don't want your credit card number. Just hit subscribe and you'll get all of our video content for free sent directly to your phone, faster than anybody else gets it on OKPreps.com. So subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll get all of our kickoff shows. You'll get all of our highlights as well. And we'll be at several games this weekend getting highlights from some of the top matchups across Oklahoma, so you'll want to check those out. Also, for our podcast listeners, again, you can listen to the OKPreps Kickoff Show. If you don't want to watch it, I won't take it personally. You can listen to it in podcast form. All you have to do is search OKPreps on Apple Podcasts, hit subscribe. Again, doesn't cost you anything. Just hit subscribe, and then you'll be able to get all of our great podcast content, not only the OKPreps Kickoff Show, but also the OKPreps Roundup, which is our recap show. So you get the preview and the recap show all via the OKPreps Podcast Network. So just go to Apple Podcasts, hit subscribe, and while you're there, while you're checking us out via the podcast, go ahead and rate us, review us, leave a review, leave a rating as well. That definitely helps us out. Let us know how we're doing here with the OKPreps Kickoff Show and on the weekends with the OKPreps Roundup podcast. But as we do each and every single week, we kick things off here on the Kickoff Show with the OKPreps 10. Every single Monday, we release the top 10 games across the state of Oklahoma on OKPreps.com. And here's a look at this week's top 10 games across the state. I mentioned it was a big week in Class 4A as the top 2 matchups this week feature 4A teams, as 4 of the top 6 teams in Class 4A are going to be in action against one another this week. Can't wait to see what happens there. We're going to get plenty of shuffling in the rankings when they come out, when they're updated on Sunday on OKPreps.com, so be sure to stay tuned for that. But as we do each and every single week, we start at the top with the game of the week, and what better matchup than 1 versus 2? It's number 1 Tuttle hosting number 2 Bethany, and I write down notes for each matchup going into the week, and I included this in our top 10 post on Monday. You don't need me to hype this matchup up. If you need a reason to get excited about this matchup, you don't have a pulse. It's number 1 versus number 2. It's a rematch of last year's state championship game in Class 4A. It's Tuttle looking to extend their winning streak to 20 games in a row, looking to defend their home turf, home grass, continue to have Tuttle be title town. It's Bethany and their star quarterback Sam Brandt looking to come in and dethrone the defending state champs after losing not once but twice to the Tuttle Tigers last year. They lost in the regular season 30-7. Then it was much closer in the state championship game, but Tuttle got the best of Bethany in that one as well, winning it 35-28. This matchup, without a doubt, is our game of the week. I cannot wait. I'll be on the sidelines there in Tuttle. I cannot wait to take in a game in beautiful Tuttle, Oklahoma on a Friday night. And what better way to do it than 1 versus 2. This is a matchup that did not disappoint last year. I don't expect it to disappoint this year, as you have a Tuttle team that has been dominant once again this year. Offensively, defensively, they picked right back where they left off last year, coming off their state championship. And for Bethany, you look at what Sam Brandt has been able to do so far in the first half of the season. He hasn't had to put up the monster numbers that he did a year ago. When you take a look at some of his stats that he's put up so far, they don't really compare to what he did last year. But that's because last year the dude was wearing a Superman cape offensively and defensively. So it was going to be hard for him to match those numbers anyway. But one thing that I've really been impressed by with Bethany this year is how they're managing the game, managing those opportunities for Sam Brant. He's not having to do everything. He has plenty of guys around him that are able to carry the load as well. And that's why I think this matchup could end up being closer than a lot of people expect. It's certainly going to be closer than 30-7 in the regular season last year. It might be more like what we saw in the state championship game with Tuttle getting by 35-28. But staying in Class 4A, we mentioned how several of the top teams are in action against one another. We stay in that top 6 as number 3 Poteau will host number 6 Central. And I mentioned it a few weeks ago with Central going on the road to take on Hilldale. And I said these words. I said, we're going to find out. We're going to find out just how good Central is. They go on the road and they dominated Hilldale. They put up big numbers offensively. And I hate to say it, but fast forward 2 weeks later, and we're still going to find out just how good this Central team is, because it's one thing to go on the road and beat a Hilldale team that seems to be rebuilding a little bit this year. It's another thing to go on the road to take on a Poteau team that is hungry, that is determined, that fell short of the state championship game a year ago, that has one of the best players in Class 4A in Easton Francis. We're going to talk more about him here momentarily in our Players to Watch segment. But you have Central, who's put up huge numbers, obviously off to their best start in in recent memory, off to a 5-0 start. Now they go on the road to take on a Poteau team that their only loss on the season was a close one to Reno to kick off the season. Reno, one of the better teams in Class 5A. Poteau has the opportunity to end Central's dream start to the 2019 season, but at the same time, I do think that Central can put up points. They've already proven it this year that they have the potential to be explosive offensively, especially with their quarterback, KT Owens. So I think that this game's going to be pretty close throughout. I'm looking forward to seeing what the outcome ends up being, and I hate saying it again, Central fans, but let's find out. Let's find out just how serious you guys are, because it's one thing, as I mentioned, to go on the road and beat Hilldale. That makes you a strong team in Class 4A. That makes you, a bona fide playoff team. But you don't want to just be a playoff team. You want to be a state championship contender, and one way to do that is go on the road and beat the Poteau Pirates. Our number 3 game, a little luster has been taken off of this matchup in 6A2, as number 3 Muscogee, undefeated on the season, will host number 6 Sapulpa, coming in at 4-1. Sapulpa beat Muscogee last year 49-48 in an overtime ball game there. The Chieftains getting the victory over Muscogee. Muscogee off to a great start this year. Sapulpa, their only loss so far this season, coming to top-ranked Bixby. But as I mentioned, some of the luster has been taken away from this matchup, and we had it as our number 3 game going into the week, and then we found out the news that Sapulpa quarterback Eli Williams is going to miss the rest of the regular season and the playoffs due to a torn ACL, his senior year effectively over. I'm going to talk more about injuries specifically with Eli later on in the question portion of this kickoff show. But Sapulpa now without their star quarterback Eli Williams, they did get their star running back Tajon Taft back last week. He had a great game in their win over Bartlesville, both running and catching the ball. So it's one of those deals where you hate to see Eli Williams go down if you're a Sapulpa fan. But the good news is you did bring Taft back, and he is appearing to be at full strength. He had a great game last week, so if he can pick up where he left off against Bartlesville, then the Chieftains will have a shot here. Other than that, Muscogee defensively has been outstanding. They're causing turnovers left and right. I think Sapulpa is going to be starting a freshman at quarterback, replacing Eli Williams. Going on the road to face Muscogee, it will definitely be a tall task for Sapulpa to get a win here. Muscogee, they'll probably, especially defensively, be licking their chops, looking to take advantage of some inexperience from the young freshman quarterback for Sapulpa that's going to be starting on Friday night. Our number 4 game, we go down to Class 2A as number 3 Millwood at 4-1 goes on the road to take on undefeated Washington. You see there Washington not ranked by OKPreps, and I know that doesn't make us very popular in the Washington area, as a lot of other people do have them ranked. And really, when I'm asked why aren't they ranked, the answer is very simple. It's twofold. One, all this stuff is going to figure itself out. So you get a win on Friday night against Millwood, you're going to be ranked on Sunday, guaranteed. 2, I've said it week in and week out, and if I haven't said it every single week, I've said it at least every other. Class 2A is the deepest class in the state of Oklahoma. There are so many good quality teams that are on the outside looking in on those top 10 rankings that come playoff time, I wouldn't be surprised if we see upsets when you consider teams that aren't ranked throughout the year beating teams that are ranked throughout the season, because there are so many good football teams. They're all right there. I say it, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I wish that for Class 2A only I could upgrade it to a top 15 or a top 20, because I think there's some really good football teams, including Washington, that are being left out. But when you take a look at this matchup with Millwood, Millwood won a very, very close one with Washington. Washington nearly snapped Millwood's winning streak last year in the regular season before Vian eventually did in the playoffs. Washington nearly beat Millwood. The Falcons escape with a 22-17 victory. Millwood also beat Washington in the 2017 Class 2A state championship game to win their second straight title. So Washington certainly has a lot to be thinking about coming into this matchup, knowing the way the game ended between them and Millwood last year, knowing that they lost in a championship game against Millwood after scoring early. They led 7-0, and then it was all Millwood after that in the 2017 title game. And knowing how a win here definitely puts them in the conversation for the best in Class 2A. Big opportunity on the line for Washington on Friday night. Our number 5 game, we go up to 6A1, and based on the records and the rankings, this isn't a very interesting ball game. But when you take a look at the names of the programs, it certainly is. Number 4 Putnam City North, undefeated on the season at 5-0, will host number 9 Union at 1-4. And before you ask if those are typos, no, they are not. Union 1-4 on the season for the first time in nearly 4 decades, ranked number 9 in our rankings. And OKPreps.com started in 2014. We've been around for a little over 5 years now, been doing rankings for football every single week during that 5-year stretch. Union has never been ranked as low as 9. I don't even think they've been ranked outside of the top 5 during our time doing this over the last 5 years. So that tells you what type of upset and shock it has been for Union, starting 1-4 on the season. More importantly, 0-2 in district play. Now they have to go on the road to take on a Putnam City North team that has plenty of talent. However, Union certainly has the edge when it comes to them and PC North. They have dominated this series. They beat PC North 52-7 in their meeting last year, and they've blown out the Panthers every time they've stepped foot on the field in the last 5 years in district play. Union has blown out PC North. I don't think there's going to be a blowout coming. I think this is going to be a competitive game. Whether or not Union wins or loses, I still think that this is going to be an intriguing matchup, not just because of the records, not just because of what's on the line, but because these are two good football teams. PC North has talent. Union has talent. It should be noted, in that loss to Mustang last week, Union without their quarterback, J.D. to Geneva. Will he be able to play on Friday? We'll wait and see. I'm not sure about that right now. So we'll see whether or not he is back on the field. And if he is, this Union team looks different with him at the quarterback position. So Union certainly a lot on the line, looking to avoid going 0-3 in district play. Look, the overall record 1-4, who cares? It's all about that district record. If they go 0-3, if they start district play 0-3, it's a must win week after week over the next month just to get in to the playoffs. And then once you're in, you're possibly looking at a road game at Broken Arrow, the other district champion in the first round of the playoffs. And so you want to avoid being that bottom seed going into the playoff round. Our number 6 game, we go to Class 3A, a pair of undefeated teams. Not very often that it's week 6 and we get a matchup featuring 2 undefeateds, but that's what we get as number 4 Sulphur hosts number 7 Lone Grove in southern Oklahoma. Sulphur 4-0 on the year, Lone Grove 5-0 on the season. Sulphur had one of their games earlier this year canceled due to weather. That's the reason why they're 4-0 as opposed to 5-0. Sulphur beat Lone Grove 56-16 in their matchup last year. And when you take a look at that district in Class 3A, that's the district on the west side district that is across from Heritage Hall's district and Kingfisher's district and John Marshall's district. So you want, if you're Sulphur or Lone Grove, this is a must-win game because you want to avoid being that third team in this district because there's another mighty team in their district called Plainview that both Sulphur and Lone Grove are gunning for. Plainview number 3 right now in our Class 3A rankings. They are the projected district champion in that district. So if you're Sulphur or Lone Grove, this is a must-win situation because you want to avoid being the 3 seed in this district and have to go on the road in the first round of the playoffs, more than likely facing maybe a John Marshall, maybe a Kingfisher in the first round. You want to avoid that if you're Lone Grove or Sulphur. So a win here sets you up for a potential district championship showdown with Plainview down the line. And even a loss doesn't necessarily take either one of these teams out of the conversation. There's a lot of football left to be played. And honestly, I think Plainview, they are the favorite in this district, but they could be upset. Sulphur, Lone Grove, they've been playing some good football so far this season. Our number 7 game, we go to Class 5A as number 8 Collinsville will host number 5 Tahlequah. Tahlequah finds themselves as the last remaining undefeated team in Class 5A after several unbeatens went down on Friday night in Week 5. Tahlequah 5-0, Collinsville 4-1. Collinsville beat Tahlequah like a drum last year, 43-8 at Doc Wadley Stadium there at NSU. I was there for that one. Collinsville ran up and down the field on Tahlequah. Now the only problem is a lot of those guys are no longer on Collinsville's team, so Tahlequah certainly has an edge there with a lot of pieces from last year coming back. They are 5-0. However, they're one of those teams that talent-wise, I don't know how they match up compared to some of the elite teams in Class 5A. And so if you're Tahlequah and you're wondering why you're not getting more pub, why you're not getting more of an opportunity to be considered one of the favorites in 5A, like a Carl Albert, like a Bishop McGinnis or an Edison, the reason is very simple. Got to prove it. Early on this season, you've had close calls. A win is a win is a win. I always say that, but at the same time, I want to see impressive victories. What Collinsville did to Tahlequah last year was impressive. They went on the road and they beat Tahlequah like a drum. So for the Tigers, go on the road, beat Collinsville like a drum, get some revenge there, get a much-needed district victory, and then you're going to set yourself up for success down the line in a district that also features a prior team that is extremely hungry. Their only loss coming to a team from out of state in Arkansas. Shout out Siloam Springs, former Oologah coach Brandon Craig. They kicked off the season with Pryor and got a win, but ever since then, Pryor undefeated on the season, including a big win over Wagner earlier in the year. So that's a district that, similar to the one we just talked about with Lone Grove, Sulphur, and Plainview, Tahlequah, Collinsville, and Pryor, you want to avoid being that 3 seed. So this is a must-win situation for both teams going into Friday night. Our number 8 game is one that takes place on Thursday up in 6A1 as number 2 Broken Arrow will go on the road to take on number 5 Westmoore. Broken Arrow 4-1 on the year. Westmoore 5-0. Broken Arrow beat Westmoore 69-10 on their way to an undefeated 2018 season that ended with a 6A1 state championship. Broken Arrow, this is their second consecutive game against a West Side team that comes in undefeated. They welcomed in 4-0 Norman last week on Friday night. Norman jumped up 7-0 on the Tigers, but then it was all Broken Arrow after that as BA beat Norman 35-13 to send Norman home with their first loss on the year. Now they'll look to do the same thing to Westmoore on Thursday night, and it's a similar situation where Westmoore, their strength, when you look at offensively what they've been able to do so far this year, it's certainly with the passing game and their quarterback Dayton Wolf. I mentioned earlier in the program we've put out our mid-season reports for all the classes, 6A1 all the way down to Class A. And we mentioned the player of the year, or best, top player so far this season has been Westmoore quarterback Dayton Wolf. His numbers that he's put up throwing the ball have been outstanding, completing nearly 70% of his passes, almost 20 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. However, he's going up against a Broken Arrow defense where their strength is in the secondary, led by Miles Slusher, one of the best safeties in the country, led by several other defensive backs that have Division I potential. That is their strength defensively, is in that secondary, in that defensive backfield, and they were able to contain Norman and their passing attack. And when I compare Norman and Westmoore, I honestly think that Norman, their offense and their passing attack might be better than Westmoore. So if BA was able to contain Norman, what happens when they go on the road to face number 5 Westmoore? Our number 9 game, we go back to Class 5A as number 10 Ardmore will host number 9 El Reno. El Reno coming in at 4-1, their first loss of the season coming last week. Ardmore 3-1, similar situation to them in Sulphur. They had a game earlier this season get canceled due to weather. That's why they're 3-1 as opposed to 4-1. Ardmore beat El Reno 31-17 last year, and this is a huge game district-wise for playoff seeding, as we mentioned El Reno losing their first game of the year last week to Noble in an absolute shootout. No defense involved. 72-62 was the final score there as El Reno dropped their first game to Noble. Ardmore, if they can hand El Reno another loss, that makes things very interesting in Class 5A when you take a look at the playoff picture. If El Reno were to fall to that 3rd seed or maybe even the 4th seed, then you're talking about a first-round matchup on the road against possibly Carl Albert, possibly Bishop McGuinness. And while El Reno pushed Carl Albert in the first round of the playoffs last year, they certainly don't want to have to go on the road if they don't have to. One way to avoid that is by going on the road on Friday night, facing an Ardmore team that has certainly improved after their shutout loss to Ada back in week 1 or week 0, whenever they kicked off the season. Their first game of the year, they were shut out by Ada. This is a young Ardmore team that had to replace a lot off of last year's state runner-up team that lost to Carl Albert in the title game, but this team appears to be improving week after week, and that could be a bad thing for El Reno as Ardmore looking to hand the Indians their 2nd straight loss. El Reno looking to bounce back on Friday night. In our final game, our number 10 game, we take a look in 6A2 as number 2 Stillwater looks to remain undefeated as they welcome in number 7 Choctaw. They come in at 3-2 on the season. Stillwater beat Choctaw by 20 in their matchup last year, winning 42-22. And the thing that I want to see from Stillwater, and the thing that I'm very intrigued by when it comes to this matchup, I think that Stillwater's the favorite without a doubt. Just a glimpse into the future. We're going to make picks at the end of this show, and I'm taking Stillwater in this matchup. So full transparency, I'm taking the Pioneers against Choctaw here. But at the same time, I want to see just how dominant Stillwater is, because this is a good Choctaw team offensively and defensively. They have the potential to play with Stillwater for a little bit, and keyword is a little bit. I think that Stillwater offensively is going to be too much. But the thing I want to see is, how does Stillwater beat Choctaw? Because all of their wins so far have been by at least 30 points. They have dominated every opponent that they've played so far, but to date, they haven't played a team as talented as Choctaw. So does that dominance, 30-plus point victories, does that continue on Friday night? If it does, then you really need to take Stillwater seriously as a contender to Bixby in the 6A2 championship race. All right, that does it for the OKPreps 10. Again, you can check out the OKPreps top 10 games every single Monday on OKPreps.com. We take a look at the OKPreps 10 to kick off our OKPreps Kickoff show each week. We also recap the top 10 games to kick off the OKPreps Roundup podcast every weekend. But enough talk from me about these matchups. Let's hear from some of the coaches that are involved, and let's go back to our game of the week with number 1 Tuttle hosting number 2 Bethany, and hear from Tuttle head coach Brad Ballard on the matchup.
I won't lie to you. Our kids are excited to play. It will be a fun atmosphere against a very, very good opponent. And we have a lot of respect for those guys. Gosh, Michael, we've seen them, this 3 times in a calendar year now. So, our guys know who they are. They put up great numbers. They've played good defense. They've done a lot of things really, really well so far this year and seem to be playing really hungry. So, it's a big, big challenge, and we have the utmost respect for them, and we're excited to play in a big game, man. Our guys love that, and, like you talked about preseason, you've got that target on your back every week, so you're getting everyone's best every week, but we're really excited for this one.
And on the other sideline, you have number 2 Bethany looking to go on the road and upset defending champion Tuttle. Their head coach, John Arthur, talks about this matchup and the advantage to having seen this team not once but twice last year.
Yeah, it's kind of like, and there's a couple other teams in this boat, but playing people like Tuttle and Blanchard, year in and year out, I think we all know each other pretty good, and that certainly goes for us and Tuttle. And that kind of, I don't know that it makes a whole lot of difference in the outcome of games, because it's kind of a two-way street on that kind of deal, and especially, you've got both of our teams, and we both get back a pretty significant number of guys off of our teams from last year, so things are definitely similar in a lot of ways, and both teams have some new guys in some positions, and so you're kind of trying to work off a little bit of what you know from last year, but both teams are doing some new things with new guys they've got plugged in for the people that did leave and graduate, and so it's kind of just going to be in games like this, it's it comes down to who does little things right and who executes the night of the game, obviously, and I think both teams are going to come in prepared and ready to play, and you just got to execute in the game situation.
The Central Braves are off to a 5-0 start, and they're looking to prove that they belong with the Tuttles, with the Bethanys in Class 4A, with the Poteaus, who's their matchup this week. They go on the road to take on the Pirates. Central head coach Kip Shaw talks about the start to this season, but how the Braves are not satisfied with just going on the road and competing. They want to win against Poteau.
Well, the one thing that I stress to my players is this game is only important because it's the next game. The one thing we've done better this year than we've ever done in the past year is we're more focused on our job and our responsibility and growing this program. And so my kids have kind of matured, and I don't ever want them to make something bigger than it really is. I know the outside world is going to make it a big deal, but to my kids, the only reason why this game is important is because it's the next one. And we've been successful because we've limited our turnovers. We've played fast, and that comes with knowing your assignment. And of course, let me tell you, the kids are excited about that. And they see that the fruits of their labor are starting to pay off. And so hopefully that continues the rest of the season. But like I told them, if you're not careful and you start looking down the road further and further and further, you'll slip and you'll lose, what success you've had.
The Muscogee Roughers have very quietly put together a very impressive start to their 2019 season. In 6A2, while most of the attention might be on the Bixby Spartans and the Stillwater Pioneers, Muscogee has a very strong defense and has some playmakers all over the field. They welcome in number 6 Sapulpa on Friday night, and head coach Rafe Watkins talks about the matchup with the Chieftains and how the Roughers look to make a point that they belong with the elite in 6A2.
Well, the biggest thing is that our kids, that's the maturity level. They realize it doesn't matter who. And still, Sapulpa's still got several great athletes out there. Now, granted, that's their quarterback, and everybody hates to lose that. It's an unfortunate part of football. We've all had that to face, and it's terrible. But we kind of knew that was happening on the weekend. We've been preparing for it all week. I know everybody else found out about it, later in the week, but we kind of knew about it. And with our kids, this day in social media and stuff, the kids talk and things, so our kids already kind of knew about it even Monday. We knew we had to take it as a business approach. They still got great players. They have the Tajon Taft, that's an outstanding player, and to me, their best football player, and and I think Coach would agree, is that Esparza, he's their tailback and linebacker, punter, kick returner. He does a little bit of everything for them. I don't know if this is even a good thing for us. They'll probably give him the ball probably 10 more times now, and that may not be a great thing for our defense. He's a strong running tailback, and so we know they've got great athletes. We're still going to have to play the best of our ability, and as we've approached it every week this year, whether it's one of those that we're favored by a bunch or if we realize it's going to be a tough game, our kids are working to get better each and every week, and so practice has been outstanding this week. I don't think we've had anywhere where we've overlooked them, and Sapulpa also against Bixby was moving him around. They've got a package. I know the paper said that he was a freshman quarterback, but he's actually a sophomore quarterback that's going to be in there, and he played even some against Bixby because they was moving Williams around and some at wide receiver in places. So they've had a package in. It's not going to be like they just had to find out on Monday and put this kid in. So they'll have a young man that's prepared. He actually throws the ball a little bit better than Williams. Now, he's not the athlete that Williams is, obviously, but he is a very good quarterback in his own right. So our kids realize that we're going to have to play the best of our abilities still.
Millwood has suffered some injuries here in the early part of the 2019 season, but they're not going to make excuses. That's not the Millwood way. Head coach Darwin Franklin knows that his team has a big challenge as they take on unbeaten Washington on Friday night, a team that Millwood is very familiar with after some meetings in the last 2 seasons. Coach Franklin talks about the matchup on Friday.
It's going to be a very good, tough ball game. Our guys are going to have to show up. Going to have to match intensity. Just with the frequency that we've seen and we've met over the last few years, it brings a certain element of, like you said, familiarity, but at the same time, just understanding exactly what you're playing for and knowing you're going on the road, going into their house, and trying to get away with one. So it just brings up a good matchup with Coach Beller and his staff and the guys. And, it's gonna be a good one. You know, it's kind of interesting. We talk about it. We just try to keep our guys moving ahead and moving forward. You know, you try to tell them what's going on and what kind of game this will be. But you know, some of them that were around, they understand it, and the other ones are kind of just like, okay, you know, it's another ball game, and we're trying to make sure they understand. This isn't another ball game. This is a little bit different. You know, this is playoff style. This is a playoff environment. So, you know, just trying to get them to lock in and stay locked in and stay focused and learn and get better at what we're trying to get them to do is the main thing.
My thanks goes out to all the coaches who joined us here on the OKPreps Kickoff Show. Again, you can tune in every single week to the OKPreps Kickoff Show and get analysis on all the top matchups, not just from me, but from the coaches that are in the games themselves. And then you can check back in with us with the OKPreps Roundup, where we have extended interviews with some of the coaches recapping some of those top matchups across the state of Oklahoma. But as we do at this part of the program every single week on the OKPreps Kickoff Show, it's time to give you 5 players to watch for week 6. And as we do, we start alphabetically and we go to our number 2 matchup, which features Poteau and Central, and we go to the Poteau Pirates with their standout, Easton Francis. Easton is an athlete for the Pirates. He's been a standout for Poteau for the last several seasons, whether it's quarterback, running back, whatever Poteau needs from him, he's able to accomplish. This year as a senior, he's playing quarterback, he's running the ball, he's even catching the ball as well. He's also playing defense, and he's having an impact in the special teams department. Francis was banged up as a junior last year as Poteau was one of the top teams in Class 4A, had an opportunity to contend for the state championship, but Francis was never really 100% for the better part of the second half of the season. And that's a big reason why Poteau fell short of an eventual state championship game, and they fell to eventual state champion Tuttle in the semifinals. Had Francis been 100%, had several other guys been 100%, it might have been a different story in 2018. But Francis doesn't want to talk about 2018. He and the Pirates are excited at the opportunity in 2019 to not only prove that they are once again state championship contenders, but they're looking to prove it and get all the way to the title game this season. One way to do that is by knocking off undefeated Central and send them back to Tulsa with their first loss on the season. Easton Francis, a dynamic player for the Pirates, and certainly one to watch going into Week 6. Our next player to watch, we go to the quarterback position in 6A2. Stillwater quarterback Gunnar Gundy in their matchup with Choctaw. I mentioned Stillwater earlier in our breakdown of the matchup. I wanted to see how well Stillwater played in this matchup against Choctaw. Are they going to be just as dominant as they've been all season long? Is Gunnar Gundy specifically going to be just as dominant as he has been all season long? Look at some of the numbers that he's put up. He's thrown 20 touchdowns and no interceptions. And oh, by the way, he's also added several rushing touchdowns during this season as well. Stillwater's offense has been working on all cylinders. They've been one of the highest scoring teams, not only in 6A2, but in the state. And we threw out the stat. They've won all of their games by at least 30 points. What if the game on Friday with Choctaw becomes close? Will Gundy and this Stillwater offense still be able to perform when there's a little more pressure on them in the second half? Or will the game be over by halftime? Gunnar Gundy has been outstanding this season. He's certainly taken his game to a completely new level. He's been considered one of the top players in the state in the last 2 seasons, and he's showing why, certainly with the numbers that he's producing as a senior in Stillwater offensively, is one of the best in Oklahoma. Our next player to watch, we go to that Muscogee-Sapulpa matchup. Muscogee's Connor Ashley is one of the top playmakers for the Ruffers, and we mentioned how they've been somewhat quiet this season with most of the attention. We just talked about Stillwater, most of the attention being on Stillwater or defending champion Bixby. Muscogee has somewhat flown under the radar. Connor Ashley and the Ruffers, as well as Ty Williams, they're not going to be flying under the radar for much longer, as Ashley, he's picked up several Division I offers as far as his recruitment goes, but he's one of those dynamic players. Similar to an Easton Francis, he does whatever is needed of him in this Muscogee offense, in this Muscogee defense, similar to some of the other top players on this Ruffer team that make an impact in more than just one way. Connor Ashley, certainly a player to watch, and in this matchup with Sapulpa, when Muscogee is trying to make a statement that they belong with some of the elite in 6A2, don't be surprised if Connor Ashley has a big game on Friday night. Another player to watch, we go to Broken Arrow and their running back, Kewan Tolbert, as Broken Arrow goes on the road to take on Westmoore on Thursday night. Kewan Tolbert, one of the more experienced players on this Broken Arrow team. He's seen playing time since he was a sophomore, and while he had to take the back seat to Noah Cortez last year as a junior, when Cortez had his Player of the Year finalist type season a year ago, Tolbert still had plenty of impact on this Broken Arrow team when they won a championship in 2018. Now in 2019, and now specifically with Tolbert back to 100%, he was banged up earlier this year with some nagging injuries, and it looks like he's back to 100%. He had a great game last week against Norman, and he'll look to continue that. And what better way to do that than going on the road to face another undefeated team from the west side? And oh, by the way, it also helps for Kewan Tolbert when he's running behind one of the best offensive lines in the state, led by All-American Andrew Rame, who has been a player to watch here on this kickoff show in the past. Kewan Tolbert, the running back from the Tigers, is back to full strength, and that's a scary thing for BA's opponents for the rest of the season. And our final player to watch, a guy that we've talked about in that game of the week, Bethany taking on Tuttle. It's Bethany superstar Sam Brandt, a guy who was a Player of the Year finalist a year ago, who put up monster numbers throwing the ball and running the ball. If Bethany is going to get the win on the road at number 1 Tuttle, it's going to be in large part due to Sam Brandt. Now you might be saying, well, earlier in the program you talked about how Brandt hasn't had to put up the numbers that he put up last year, throwing the ball, running the ball, even on defense as well. That is true. But when you're taking on the defending champs, when you're taking on number 1, you need your superstars to play at their best. Sam Brandt certainly is a superstar for Bethany. And if they have an opportunity to pull off the upset, I guarantee you it's going to be because Sam Brandt has a big game on Friday night. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does under the bright lights of Tuttle in a 1 versus 2 matchup. One of the more impressive performances that I saw last year in person was his game in the quarterfinals against Wagner, where he threw 3 touchdowns. He ran for 3 touchdowns. He also had 2 interceptions on defense. This kid is the real deal, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he does on Friday night. All right, that's 5 players to watch. We do this each and every single week. We give you 5 players to watch heading into the week of football, and we also show some of their highlights as well. Looking forward to seeing how all 5 of those players do on Friday night. Now it's time to answer some of your questions here on the OKPreps Kickoff Show. If we don't answer your question, look, full disclosure, we're recording this Wednesday afternoon at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, whatever time it is now. This show gets published on Thursday, so if you've sent us questions on social media and we don't answer them here, we will answer them on the OKPreps Roundup podcast. But as we do each and every single week, we answer your questions, send them in to us on social media, on Twitter or on Facebook. Go follow us on Twitter at OKPrepsTV, and also be sure to like us on Facebook. We start with a Facebook question. How good is the Muscogee defense? We talked about the Roughers a lot already in defensively, and we talked about how they've quietly put together a very impressive start to the season. And I don't think we have talked enough about what they've done defensively. While Bixby has been so good on offense, while Stillwater has been so good on offense, they're both averaging north of 50 points per game. Muscogee defensively has been one of the best teams in the state. Now, as far as scoring defense, they're not, at the top of the state, but they are forcing turnovers left and right, multiple turnovers every single game. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. As I mentioned, Sapulpa starting a freshman quarterback. Muscogee's defense, they have to be playing with confidence heading into week 6 with all the success that they've had so far. And you throw a freshman quarterback in front of them, they have to be really enjoying the opportunity that's ahead of them to get some fumbles, get some more interceptions, as they have been absolutely dominant when it comes to the turnover battle so far this season. So how good are they? They're extremely good. They're very talented on all 3 levels of that defense. However, the big question with Muscogee and with every other team in 6A2 is how far can they go? Can they go all the way to knocking off a Bixby or a Stillwater? We'll have to wait and see on that. We had this question coming to us on Twitter. Who is the Class A offensive MVP so far? By the time this show gets published, we will have already put out our mid-season report for Class A, and in that it includes the player of the year, halfway point player of the year, whatever you want to call it, and that's Pawhuska quarterback Bryce Drummond. He's been outstanding, and Pawhuska has looked great offensively. They got a big win over Tahlequah last week where they blew out the defending champs on the road. That's an impressive victory, and Bryce Drummond looked great in the victory again. Throwing the ball, running the ball, the kid is the real deal. Good size, 6'2", 6'3". He looks the part, just a junior. That's the scary thing, as he's definitely emerging as one of the top quarterbacks in the state of Oklahoma right now. And he's been putting up monster numbers, so I got to give it to him. Bryce Drummond certainly has been the top player so far in Class A, but plenty of football left to be played and a lot of really good football players in Class A. We also had this question coming to us on Twitter. He said, name the 8 quarterfinal teams in Class 5A. Go. That's difficult because you can't just base it off of standings. Obviously, it's going to look different going into the playoffs. The playoff seeding is going to decide, obviously, the matchups, and I might like one matchup more than the other. But right now, if I had to pick them, and I'm going to pick them because you asked me to, I'm going to go with Ardmore. I'm going to go with Reno. Coincidentally, those two face each other on Friday night. I'm going to go with Carl Albert and Bishop McGuinness. Those 2 perennial powers. I'm going to go with Edison. And then I'm going with 3 teams from that district on the east side with Collinsville, Collinsville, Pryor, and Tahlequah. I think all three of them end up making the quarterfinals in Class 5A. That's leaving a lot of good football teams out, so a lot of things can certainly change between now and then. But if I had to pick the 8 right now, that's who I would go with. And then finally, this is a question from me. I'm asking this question. What's up with all the season-ending injuries? And we mentioned it at the beginning of the show when we were talking about the Sapulpa-Muscogee matchup. Eli Williams, Sapulpa's star quarterback, done for the year with a torn ACL. I'm tired of having to report about it. We tweeted it out when Eli announced that his senior season was done. I said that I hated that, and I'm getting really tired of having to tweet updates with kids, being done for the year. Bishop Kelly, they're without Corey Lewis, they're without Montrell Cozart, they're without Zach Middleton for the rest of the season. All three of those guys, Division I caliber players. Middleton committed to OSU, Lewis committed to Army. Cozart, I believe, is a Division I caliber player, might end up playing at the D2 level. Claremore, Quentin Skinner, shout out to him. He just committed to Kansas. However, he's done for the year with a knee injury. There's been so many injuries so far this season. We mentioned Miles Slusher earlier in the program with Broken Arrow, one of the top players in the state, let alone the country, and he had a nagging injury for the better part of September that kept him from some games. Keywan Tolber on the very same team, he had nagging injuries. So there's been so many injuries to really good players. I'm tired of it. So let's all make a deal. No more injuries. How about that? No more injuries, because I'm tired of it. It's been devastating to see some of these great football players having their seasons cut short due to injuries. I know it's a part of the game, but that doesn't mean I have to like it. All right, let's finish it up with some picks. As we do every single week, we wrap up the kickoff show by making some picks on all the top 10 games. Let's throw that top 10 graphic back up on the screen for you. Last week I went 7-3 in picks. Not that that means anything, but hey, above 500, a win is a win. We start with our number 10 game, Stillwater taking on Choctaw. I'm going with the Pioneers. As I mentioned, I think that Stillwater gets the win here. I want to see how dominant they are. Do they get another 30-point win, or does Choctaw keep it close? I want to see this game to see what happens with the result, but I do think that Stillwater gets the victory here. El Reno taking on Ardmore. El Reno in bounce-back mode after the loss to Noble in a shootout. I think they're going to be angry. I think they're going to be looking to prove a point, and that they belong with the elite in Class 5A, as 5A seems to be extremely wide open right now. I'm going with El Reno there. Our number 8 game, Broken Arrow taking on Westmoore, Thursday night special in Moore, Oklahoma. I'm going with Broken Arrow. I think that the Tigers, their strength defensively matches up perfectly with what Westmoore wants to do, which is to throw the ball with their star quarterback, Dayton Wolf. Unfortunately, I think that they're not going to have a whole lot of success. I think Broken Arrow, that's going to play right into their strength, which is their secondary, as I mentioned. And then when Broken Arrow gets the football, they're going to want to ground and pound as they do every single week. And I think that the Tigers walk out of Moore with a victory. Our number 7 game, you have Collinsville taking on Tahlequah. Tahlequah, wanting to prove that they belong with the elite in Class 5A, similar to an El Reno, similar to some of the other teams. They want to be in that conversation with a Carl Albert, with a Bishop McGinnis. They can do that by beating Collinsville. I don't know if it's going to happen. I'm taking the Cardinals here. I like the home team to get a dub. I know that Collinsville, speaking of injuries, they've been snake bit harder than just about any other team in the state, but I like Collinsville in this one. Lone Grove taking on Sulphur. I'm going with Lone Grove here. I think that Lone Grove has been off to a good start this year. A lot of blowout victories for them. I think that this is going to be one of their first close games of the year, but I'm going with Lone Grove to get a big win. But again, in that district, both of these teams, Lone Grove and Sulphur, are chasing Plainview. Union and Putnam City North, our number 5 game, PC North. Union, I'm going with Union. I'm going with Union just because I can't see a scenario where they are 1-5 and 0-3 in district and maybe I'm dead wrong, and this is just the way high school football in Oklahoma is moving forward. But for now, I'm going with Union. I think that they bounce back and get a huge road win. But, honestly, at this point, I don't know what to expect. Our number 4 game, Millwood taking on Washington. Washington, a lot to play for here. A lot of revenge on their mind. They want to prove that they belong, the cream of the crop in Class 2A, and what better way to do that than getting a win over Millwood. I think Millwood, speaking of injuries, they've been hit hard by the injury bug as well. I think that they are starting to settle in with the personnel that they have, and I think that they get a big win on Friday night. Number 3 game, Muscogee taking on Sapulpa. Sure would love to see what Sapulpa looked like at full strength. Unfortunately, that's not what we get, and I think that definitely leads to Muscogee having a big edge here, so I'm going with the Roughers to get the win, but I want to see how that defense performs specifically with Sapulpa and their star running back, the Taft kid, had a dynamic game last week against Bartlesville. I want to see how Muscogee defends him on Friday. Our number 2 game, you have Poteau taking on Central. Central, just how good are you? We're going to find out, but I'm going with Easton Francis and the home team, the Poteau Pirates. I think that this is a very good team. Despite that early loss to El Reno is a good football team. No slacking, no knock on Poteau by losing on the road to El Reno. So I'm going with Poteau here. Defensively, I think that they're going to be able to contain Central in their offense. And then finally, game of the week, 1 versus 2 in Class 4A, Tuttle versus Bethany. I'm going with the champs. Tuttle. They've looked great so far. As I mentioned, it looks like they've picked up right where they left off last year. So I'm going with Tuttle to get a big win on Friday night against Bethany in a rematch of last year's state championship game. All right, that does it for this week's edition of the OKPreps Kickoff Show. Again, be sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. And also be sure to check out OKPreps.com throughout the weekend. We're going to have highlights of Thursday night's matchup between Broken Arrow and Westmoore, as well as Friday night's game of the week with number 1 Tuttle and number 2 Bethany. So we'll have those highlights on OKPreps.com. Also, another great reason for you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll get those highlights before they're even published to the website. Just go to youtube.com/OKPreps and you'll hit subscribe right there, and you'll get all of our great video content, including the OKPreps Kickoff Show throughout the season. Also coming up this weekend, we will have our updated OKPreps rankings. Definitely a lot of movement after last week. We'll see what happens going into week 7, and then we'll also have our new candidates for the OKPreps Player of the Week. Shout out to Wayne's Ethan Mullins, who was this week's staff and fans' choice for OKPreps Player of the Week after running for more than 500 yards in a win over Mounds last week. So shout out to him, not only on a great game, but being this week's OKPreps Player of the Week. One final time, I'm your host, Michael Knight. Enjoy the football on Thursday or Friday night, and be sure to join us on the weekend with the OKPreps Roundup podcast. Subscribe. If you haven't done so, just search OKPreps on Apple Podcasts, and then you'll get the OKPreps Roundup, and we'll recap all of the top action. We'll be joined by coaches from all over the state to talk about some of those games, and then we'll be right back here next Thursday for another edition of the OKPreps Kickoff Show. This has been Week 6 OKPreps Kickoff Show. I'm your host, Michael Knight, right here on OKPreps.com.